Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Simeon Morrow and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and/or go to the Facebook Live video feed, the link to which I'll now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. Tonight, our featured guest is Chris Britton, a film and television, theater, and voice actor, who joins us from Vancouver, Canada. We're also pleased to be joined by Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. Chris, welcome.
Hi there. Pleasure to be here.
Chris, so tell us a little bit about yourself in a few words.
In a few words, that might be a little difficult, but born and raised in Toronto, studied acting as a teenager, was with a dance company for a short while, went to York University, I got my honors BA, and then entered the acting profession doing theater, then eventually voiceovers, animation, film and television. And I spent the majority of my life in Toronto, but then I moved to Vancouver, and so now I work in both cities, Vancouver and Toronto. And I was just in Toronto recently and working, and my wife and I enjoy our life in Vancouver when it's not raining, and that's sort of as few words as possible. I visit my daughter in Toronto and friends, and I enjoy traveling around the country.
Okay. Chris, tell us a little bit about when you started acting and what your idea was of the field and maybe what it is today, because when I read the introduction, I said that you're a television, a voice, a theater actor. What was your first idea about it, and what's that idea now?
Well, when I first started, I was living. I moved out of home when I was 16 and left school when I was 16, and so I started to study at night around the age of 17, 18, and we're talking sort of 67, 68, 69, and the business in Canada was in some ways fledgling, the film and television. So the goal was to either be at Stratford or the Shaw Festival and pick up what television was available. But I was interested in studying, and that's what I did at night till I was about 19, 20. And I was fortunate enough to be invited to a dance company, a modern dance company. And I was a member of that company for about a year and a half. And then I was asked to teach a course at York University in the sort of the work of the British set designer, Edward Gordon Craig. Because I used to collect his first editions, and I used to, read a great deal about him. And so I decided to audition for the theater and dance program at York University at the same time that I was offered to teach a course at York University in Gordon Craig. And that's what I did for the next 4 years. And then that took me to the mid 70s. And then I was out in the world doing regional theater. I went to Stratford for 2 seasons. I was at the Shaw Festival for 2 seasons. And And then I would go back and forth to New York quite a bit. I did some theater in New York and in Hartford Stage. And around that time, the late 70s, is when I started to get into voiceover as well. And that's kind of the trajectory of how things went from when I was a teenager to my mid to late 20s.
So tell us about a little bit about this work, this voiceover work. So there's the acting or whatever is already there. The image is already there. You're just responsible for the voice of a certain character and reproducing all the text and sound that character makes.
Much easier than doing a play, I can tell you. How it, people used to say to me, "Oh, you've got such a good voice, and you should maybe go into radio or something like that." And that didn't interest me. But I started to make connections with people who were actually recording commercials for television and radio, and animation was happening as well. And I made my first voice tape with material that I collected myself. If I heard something on the television that I thought was in my sort of vocal range, or I read some copy in a magazine that I thought, oh, that's interesting copy. And I went into a studio in someone's basement, as a matter of fact. I remember that quite clearly. And we sort of put together different commercials, and he put some music behind some of them that needed it. And at that time, of course, you had cassettes, those little cassettes, and you would take those cassettes to all the advertising agencies in the city. And there would be dozens of these advertising agencies. So you used to deliver them yourself, or you would put them in the mail. And you had, hopefully I had a voice agent at that time, and, they would submit you. And that's how I sort of got into it. And then animation was coming along at that time. And I started to get some work doing some of those voices. So that's how that started. And I enjoy the work in a studio a lot. It's very freeing to be in a voice studio. The phrase I always have in the back of my head, because you'll have producers on the other side of the glass, and they'll be asking for take off half a second, add a second onto a 30-second commercial or something, or with that word, can you just twist it a little bit? And I always, in the back of my mind, think, loosey-goosey, never get tense, just go with the flow, be relaxed, just, try to accomplish what they want as the client, because they're paying. So that's, it's sort of a freeing aspect to that business.
Okay, so Chris, we have a question comment from Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California. Lino, nice to see you again.
It's good to be here, and welcome, Chris. It's a pleasure that you're with
Pleasure
us.
to meet you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mike, I actually have two questions. Number one, did you have any training regarding the trying to reproduce or create different timbres or tone qualities of these different characters? And number two, how do you maintain the health of your voice? Because it is very, very easy to ruin your voice, to ruin the mechanism in order to replicate or create something that is not inherently natural to you.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And as you get older, it's more relevant because your voice does change. And of course, as Carol will probably be able to enlarge upon this, but you have to be aware of not tensing your throat and your voice. Now, that's a little difficult if I'm doing a character that requires, sort of a gravelly voice. And so you really have to be cautious about the strain you're putting on your voice to keep your voice open, your larynx and your throat open. keep it well lubricated, drink lots of water. I always take lozenges into a studio. But also the training at the beginning for me, it was really just listening to cartoons and duplicating, imitating, so that you discover, oh, I can do that voice. Oh no, that's not in my range. I don't, that doesn't sound right. I mean, there are some people who can do 1,000 accents, 1,000 different timbres. You know, I don't have, you know, that gift. So I usually play villains or, you know, sort of scary characters, or now older and wise characters, like in My Little Pony. But, you know, that's sort of, at the beginning, it was what I was able to accomplish and train myself. I was sort of studying what I was able to do by recording myself, listening to it, and sort of imitating cartoon voices.
Okay.
And then for auditions, you know, if you would be asked to audition, you know, you didn't really understand what exactly was required until you actually go into the studio. And that, you know, they might say, well, you know, you've read the text and you've seen the sketch of the character. Let's hear what you've got. And so you do, you know, what your imagination comes up with. And they say, well, you know, we want sort of in this line. And so you try to accommodate that. And so a lot of it's hit and miss. Sometimes you get it right away. But, you know, I don't know if I've answered your question, but yeah.
Okay, so let's take a listen to Chris Britton's voiceover.
Being a king is not about drawing a sword in battle. It's avoiding battle entirely.
Civilization is corrupt and decadent. It will destroy itself.
Welcome, one and all, to tonight's performance of Phantasmafisto.
Do you doubt Von Doom? It is known Doom is a man of his word.
Oh, this is all your fault. You left your marmalade sandwich on the floor, and I slipped and bumped my head.
I found you lying lifeless outside the mutant registration headquarters after your friends had deserted you.
It's only a matter of time before the police locate this car. Then they'll transport you to the original site and execute you there. Light, my son. From one murderer to another, I'll see you in hell.
If I agree to grant you an audience with our leader, are you prepared to demonstrate your usefulness to us?
If you keep throwing your daughter's drink boxes in the trash instead of recycling them, I'll be forced to tell her. Do I have your attention now?
Fantastic. So Chris, tell us about this voiceover for animation. So are all those different voices, are you went in and told the producers this is what I have, or you worked on it with them, like you said, with your lozenges, going back and forth and saying loosey goosey?
Well, it's a combination of that. You know, sometimes the sketch that they, you know, you don't see. First of all, they usually record the voice first, and then they do the animation. But they have a preliminary sketch. So you see what he looks like, and then, you know, you read the text and you get an idea, and then you sort of say, well, I think he means this, and in this way. So you come up with the idea, and occasionally, you know, they ask for an accent. I can do maybe, you know, 4 or 5 different accents, and that's about it. So, you know, with animation, it's sort of in that area of what you can create. And sometimes producers and animators don't know what they want. They see the image, but they don't hear it. So then when you come into the studio, they go, oh, well, that fits perfectly. That fits perfectly with what we imagine this character looks like. So sometimes you are presenting them with something they never thought of. So that's why it's best to, come up with 2 or 3 different voices or emotional contexts for their design, their drawing.
And Chris, so you said you can do up to 4 different accents. What would those be?
German, English, Eastern European, maybe a couple of different British ones. That's about it. And Southern, the sort of the standard ones, US Southern accents. You could really do, if you have enough time, you can, there's tons of accents on YouTube. So you could listen and listen and listen and create, replicate that accent. But there are some accents that just come, sort of naturally. They're just within your wheelhouse.
And this is, like you said, listening to YouTube and kind of using your imagination is something that you trained from very early, like you said, where you were always kind of experimenting.
Yeah, you were, I think with animation, you have to sort of, even if you're watching TV and you hear something and you're channel grazing and you hear, you come onto a station that has something in animation or The Simpsons or something, and you go, oh, I can do that. Or, you're just fooling around and just, imitating it. And you sort of put it in the back of your mind that maybe for an audition for something, you can pull that out of your memory bank.
Fantastic. Sounds like a lot of fun. So let's listen to one more. So this is the commercial voiceover demo reel.
Here, upon spotting one, you shrug and say, well, la-di-da.
Want to hear the unheard of? At Miele, we're offering you a 5-year warranty on all kitchen appliances and a 10-year warranty on washers and dryers for free, which is, yes, extremely unusual.
At what point does a reputation become a legacy? BMW 5 Series.
Lots of things happen outside of regular office hours, including accidents. Which is why day or night, 7 days a week, our experienced legal team is standing by.
We've all heard the expression, a staycation. Well, at Coast, we think a staycation is like a birthday party without cake. It's like a parade without floats. It's just plain wrong.
Colgate Plus, the odd-looking, super-cleaning, comfy-feeling toothbrush.
Experience a world of wonders aboard the Rocky Mountaineer. Call or log on today to find out more about our exclusive plane-to-train offer.
When you've been Formula One Rookie of the Year, when you've won more Grand Prix races in your first season than any other driver, what else is there? If you keep throwing your daughter's drink boxes in the trash instead of recycling them, I'll be forced to tell her. Do I have your attention now?
Fantastic. So we have another comment from Professor Lino Rivera. Lino?
Yes, Chris, it is really very, very admirable what you do. As you can hear, I have an accent and I could not get rid of this accent. I have been here in the United States for some 37 years, coming from the Philippines. And I am always very admiring people who can imitate accents. Now, do you have some kinds of trainings? Do you have to study? I mean, you must have a mirror, somebody who can comment on whether you're doing the accents correctly or not. Could you expound a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but I've been told that, or at least I've heard that up until, if you speak one language up until the age of 15 or 16, and then you learn another language, it's very hard to completely remove that accent, your original accent. I think it requires a lot of work to do that. I know a couple of actors who came to Canada from England, and they weren't able to lose their English accent. Now, I just think, but I mean, we see English actors on American television all the time, and they have a flawless American accent. But that requires a gift, an ear, and a lot of work. I mean, they will have a voice coach. They will have someone working with them a couple of hours a day. They will be listening to tapes. They will be, really working on that. And some are successful at that, and some, it's just not within their tongue and their mouth and their ear. So it all depends. I think it's an individual gift or a difficulty.
So did it come natural to you, or did you have to do a little bit of extra training, extra work? Did it come easy or hard for you?
I think some accents come easy, like sort of a typical British accent comes easy. I have to really work if it's a Cockney accent or a Welsh accent. I have to really listen to that and work on that. If it's sort of an upper class, sort of standard British accent, that comes much easier. Eastern European can come a bit easier to me. And there isn't that much call for it, to tell you the truth. Sometimes with acting auditions, I get asked to the specs say British, and of course a lot of people because of my name and my appearance, they think, oh well, Chris Britton, he's he can do a British accent, and and that's true. So a lot of it is where you are sort of slotted in your career, so it does require a lot of work for certain accents, and some just come sort of naturally. It's just depends on your ear, I think.
Chris, before we move on to film and television, could you tell us if I'm correct? We heard your common higher British accent in the commercials, but we didn't hear your Cockney accent. Is that right?
Oh no, I haven't done anything. I'm not going to try a Cockney accent. No.
So the Cockney accent, it's simply kind of considered like a lower class, more working class.
Well, it is, and it's. I love the Cockney accent, but it's I never get asked to do it, so I don't have it sort of at the tip of my tongue. But if I was asked to do it for a voice audition, I would have to work at it. I would have to listen to a number of recordings of Cockney accents and sort of.
You don't want to give us a little example right now?
No.
Okay, understood. So we're going on to Chris Britton's voice and television work. Here we have it. So we have here Riverdale. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Chris?
Riverdale is a very popular series that I think is probably in its 4th season. And I played the judge for about 3 or 4 episodes. And surprisingly enough, they called me Judge Britton. And that was a first.
Wow.
The character's name was Judge Britton.
And Silent Hill?
That was also an interesting shoot. It's been years since I've seen that, but there was some wonderful actors in that, a number of local actors, but also an American and South African actress. That was sort of a dark sci-fi shoot. That was, oh, good Lord, that's got to be 20 years ago. This is the Romeo section. Now, Canadians would know this because the creator of this series also created Da Vinci's Inquest, Da Vinci's City Hall, Intelligence, and then Romeo section was the 4th in his series that he created, and I did 10 episodes of that. It was only, I think, 10 episodes, but it was a terrific series. I really enjoyed being a part of that. And this was from Intelligence, the same creator. I think I was playing a CSIS guy. And that was from Da Vinci's Inquest, with starring Nick Campbell.
So these are kind of similar roles of an elite businessman or an elite
a lawyer. This guy was a lawyer. He was kind of behind the scenes, kind of a lawyer who would kind of manipulate different aspects of problems within the city. Da Vinci, and this is also from Romeo section. Here I had just been poisoned, and I'm pointing the gun at the woman who poisoned me, but I was, I died seconds later. This was interesting. This was an anthology series called Masters of Horror. This episode was directed by John Carpenter. And that was great. Some of you might know the name John Carpenter as a horror director. I played a film critic, and you can only see a few. All those stacks of papers is really one film review that I am still writing. He was a crazy film critic, this character. And Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead and all that is just on the left there. Yeah, John Carpenter, I auditioned for him, I think, 3 times for this role. And the third time, we sat very close together, sort of across the table, and he had what ostensibly would be the camera about here, and he was where I am right now. So, you were, he wanted to make sure you weren't acting. So he was very close to you.
Wow.
So yeah, that was interesting. This was a wonderful experience. Peter Greenaway, who did The Cook, the Thief, The Wife, the Lover, The Belly of the Architect. He lives in Amsterdam. That's Martin Freeman on the left. He played Rembrandt. This is a film based on Rembrandt's painting, The Night Watch. And this film is called Night Watching. And he had a theory about what that painting represented. It was basically a cover-up of a murder. And we shot in Poland, Wales, and Amsterdam. Yeah. This is a Canadian series that is very successful. It's shown all over the world, called Murdoch Mysteries. It's a period, it's sort of a detective. Murdoch is a detective who solves crimes. And I played here a role that I'm haunted by my dead wife, who's a ghost. And so.
Wow, okay. So let's take a look. I believe we have actually a demo reel. So let's take a look at this whole demo reel.
As much as I sympathize, I can't ignore the quality of Mr. Jones's crimes. There were no extenuating circumstances.
My father threatened him. Daddy said he would hurt Jughead if FP didn't comply.
In light of these revelations, I suggest that we take a step back and reevaluate certain aspects of the case, at which time we will revisit sentencing. Adjourned.
It's crucial that we appear happily married.
I'm not going to Ottawa. Ever.
Oh, for God's sake, you don't have to live there. You can make occasional timely appearances just for a year or so.
I can make excuses while you're always out here. You've got a job of some sort.
A job of some sort. Is that what I'm good for?
I meant I could justify your absence.
Just sign the form.
Not until you agree to the terms.
Don't make me do something I won't regret.
Don't you fucking threaten me!
We've got pinpoint inclusions here, here, and here. I have a feather here.
And bearding.
Right. Not some of the cleanest rough you've ever brought me.
No. What about this one?
I opened the window on this one. I can get you a couple of cushion or radiant cuts. Maybe 6 carats apiece, vivid yellow.
You're losing too much. Can you make it fancy vivid?
I can try, but that will take time.
How much time?
3 weeks minimum.
No, I don't have time for that. We'll sell the majority as clean roughs.
And what about the rest of the parcel?
Cut some polish. I'm counting on you to be fast with this, Herman. Don't disappoint me. Please.
I just wanted to have a look before the memory tomorrow. You know, you've done a hell of a job with him, Mr. Hackman. You've done the son of a bitch right.
You're welcome.
There was a fishing trip when we were 13, just Danny and I and Dad.
At the Cape.
Yes, that one. My God, that day is still with me.
Well, you requested it specifically. It's there.
Well, I'll be off then. I was given the opportunity to be the messenger, and I failed. But you'll see. People will understand as soon as I finish my new review.
Is that what this is? All of this? That one review?
Almost finished now.
You know, there's a chance that there still may be a print out there. I was hired to find it.
To what purpose?
To show it.
You should know what you're getting into.
I'm going to send you to your maker. Hey, put your gun down.
I'm not afraid.
Put the gun down, Chase.
I will not.
I said put the goddamn gun down.
Go to hell,
You
Neely.
are under arrest.
Traitor.
Disgrace to your white race. Cuff him and take him away.
I think this is over yet, Marcus.
We are neighbors in the Bree Strat. How about making a contribution to the orphanage? We have many new children, orphaned by the Spanish Wars.
Then I think they must all be touching 30.
The governing body is now 6. Perhaps as a neighbor you might like to join us. A man of means doing charitable works. And we may need a group portrait soon to remind us of our responsibilities. Perhaps we could remind you of your responsibilities.
You're wrong. I'm being haunted by my former wife. I don't know why. But I want the police to stop persecuting me and start protecting me. If there are no further questions.
Fantastic. So, Chris, tell us about your favorite experience. I don't know. Those are all, that's over a long period of time. I gather you've shown us so many different characters. What do you feel most accomplished about? What do you feel proud of? What would you like to do more of?
Well, in terms of subject matter and people I've worked with, I would, Forrest Whitaker in Deacons for Defense and Robin Williams, of course. Those were 2 really interesting projects, and it was great to have the opportunity to work with them. I got to know Robin, a little bit on that shoot. We had a couple of scenes together. We bonded a bit over bike racing. He was quite a bike racing fan, and he was, as that character, he was very low key and responsive and courteous. And, just to give you an example of the type of actor he was, there was a scene that was taking place in a funeral home with a number of extras, and after the lunch hour, the extras all sort of filed into this building off the street, and he stood at the entrance of that building, and he did a little bit for every one of them. He did like a little joke, a little voice. He made them all feel a little special.
Wow. So you had
we, you know, a couple of us just stood there for about 10 minutes that this was going on, and it was like, you know, a masterclass of sort of quick comedy. You know, as we know, his mind was extraordinary, but he was just so gracious to everyone. You know, he made them all feel a little special.
So generally, you'd say it's the people that you've worked with that have.
Yeah,
really...
I would say so. The people, you know, that's ultimately what you take away from it. But also, you know, it's also the subject matter, because, you know, if you can do, you know, if you've done 100 projects in your life, if there are 10 projects that you are really satisfied with in terms of the subject matter and the quality and sort of what that project actually speaks to, I think you're fairly lucky, because there's a lot of crap being produced. You know, so and you know, actors do jobs because they're hired, and you know, they need the money. You know, it's you're making a living. But occasionally, you know, you're fortunate enough to be in a project that has real meaning and has a life beyond its immediate release, you know. And both that project I felt and the Forrest Whitaker Deacons for Defense, because and I feel that should be aired much more frequently, because it was about blacks in Louisiana in the mid-60s who armed themselves against the KKK, and most people don't know about that. And I thought that was a terrific script, and you know, it's unfortunate I was playing the head of the KKK, but there we are.
And
it was a fun part.
And Chris, so generally the reel that we saw, those are, like you said, those are the quality productions that you've been a part of. Those are those movies, TV shows you'd like to become your legacy. Is that right?
Well, yes, in a manner of speaking, but also, you know, you assemble a demo reel to show, you know, not every project you're in, there's a scene that you can use for a demo reel. So you have to be a bit selective, you know, and so those, you know, it's I'm going to be updating that reel soon, but, you know, those are just kind of different projects that, you know, I still am, you know, it's not, you know, there aren't scenes when I was 20 years old. They're still within, you know, an age range that I still kind of look the same. So I can still use those, you know, and there's a lot of material that you drop from your demo reel because you've aged out. You know, you can't be having a scene from when you were 30, you know, if you're 60, you know, you just can't do that. So, you know, you choose the projects that, you know, there's a nice variety of work. You know, I don't usually get cast in comedy, so, you know, I don't have anything that's sort of from Second City TV or something, you know.
Okay. So we have another comment from Lino. Lino?
Hello, yes. Actually, I have two questions to you, Chris. Number one, how do you seek out the gigs? Do you apply? Do the gigs come to you and say, hey, you know, Chris, you know, we want you to do this? And number two, the other side of the coin is, how do you filter the gigs? Do you accept? Of course, you don't accept everything. You know, you say no to some things. And what are your criteria for filtering the gigs?
Well, you know, I don't, unless it's the theater. Theater, a lot of it is personal contacts, you know, relationships that you've established over the years. But for film and television and voiceover, you know, I have an agent in Vancouver, voice and television and film agents. I have an agent in Toronto for the same voice and television and theater. And they're the ones that get all the breakdowns, they get the casting notices. So, you know, they submit you. And hopefully the casting agents, you know, certainly by a certain period, they know who you are, and they will say, oh yeah, let's see Chris for this. But rarely, but you know, sometimes another actor will say to you, did you audition for such and such a part? You know, I thought, you know, I think you'd be perfect for it. And rarely does that work out, because you know there are reasons why that actor auditioned for it and you didn't. And then in terms of choosing, most actors, and myself included, pretty well audition for most everything, unless you know you think the part is it's not worth it. You know, it's not a part that interest you at all, or there's something within the content that you don't like. You know, there's something about it that you think, no, I don't want to spend, you know, how many days working on that, learning the lines, being on set. So you do have some selectivity, and sometimes, you know, if they're not paying enough, you know, if you have a daily rate, you know, and they say, well, no, we don't want to pay you that, you know, well, then, you know, usually your agent will handle that. But, you know, those are sort of the general criterion of why you don't accept a role. But, you know, it depends on where you are, of course. You know, if you're a name, you get offered a hell of a lot of stuff, and you can be quite choosy about what you want. If you're not a name, you know, of course, you know, since the pandemic, things have changed quite a bit. So it's been a different ball game for the last 18, 20 months. So you know, it depends on, you know, a number of factors.
Just to be clear, Chris, so a name would be somebody like Robin Williams. You don't consider yourself a name?
Well, I mean, no, I mean, you know, I'm talking about, you know, names who have won Emmy Awards, and you know, who have a high, they've been the leads in US series. Yeah, I mean, those, you know, that's what I mean by names, who have a TV queue. They have, you know, 100,000 Instagram followers, you know, or they've worked at really sort of developing a following, and they've been in a number of successful TV shows as, you know, regular roles. You know, and even, you know, you talk to those actors, and you know, they have lean periods as well. It's just the, you know, the nature of the business. You know, within Canada, you know, there's a certain recognition factor for myself and other actors, but you know, there's the whole question now of aging. You know, how many roles are written for actors over 60, and that's a big consideration now. So, you know, there's just fewer roles at a certain age.
And Chris, before we follow up with that, the pandemic, you said, has changed the game. How so? Well,
before the pandemic, actors would be called in to a casting office, casting studio, and they would do the audition on tape. They would have a reader and a camera. And sometimes the director or the producer would be in that room. And they would bring in maybe 10 actors, 15 for a role, because that's, all the time they have. They might have a day or two, to audition actors for a role, and then maybe 20 at the most. But because of the pandemic, no one's going into the room. So everyone is self-taping. So the responsibility has been for the actor to get the lighting, the stands, the camera, or using your iPhone, the backdrop, having an app that accommodates those auditions, and then you submit it. So the responsibility of all that is now on the actor. So they can see, it's like dating apps, swipe left. They can accept dozens, up to 50 or 60 auditions for a single role. And they can tell within, if a producer or a director is going through them, and they can tell within seconds, no, I can do better. I can get someone closer to that part. So it's a very different experience since the pandemic. Now, what is happening now, I've noticed, is that for callbacks, they narrow it down to a certain number. For callbacks, they might bring you into the room to meet the director and the producer, and you do your audition for them. And so they get a feel of energy, who you are, they talk with you, that kind of thing. But it's been quite different since the pandemic. And harder for actors, because a lot of actors don't have, I'm fortunate that I'm married to an actor, so we can do it together. But a lot of actors don't have that, they either have to have someone on Zoom read the other actor's lines, or they bring someone into their home, and they keep their distance, and they have a mask, and all the rest of that. So it's become more complicated.
Wow, what a challenge. So let's move on to your work in theater. So Chris, tell us a little bit maybe about the audience.
The audience was quite an interesting play, really. It's the story of the Queen, for when Queen Elizabeth, when she took the throne, and her audiences with the prime ministers. I played Anthony Eden, who was Prime Minister of Britain from, was it 55 to 57, I think. And just the conversations that they had. Churchill was in it, and Margaret Thatcher, Major. And that was kind of an interesting play. It was fun. I mean, I was only on stage for 10 to 15 minutes, as all the prime ministers were. But yeah, that was quite fun. And as a side note, I had a hairpiece made for that. This is because Eden had a great head of hair. This is my wife Gwyneth and I. In Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park. Of course, we played the older roles. I played the upstairs neighbor, and she played the mother to the young female role. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. We've worked together a few times on stage, so yeah, that was good. And here I am, doing a dance step. Sort of, yeah, and yeah. This is Uncle Vanya, and I'm playing the professor Seryabakov, and I enjoyed that play. I've only done I think 2 Chekhovs. I wish I could do more. I really like Chekhov. He was a grumpy old guy.
So Chris, tell us, so you started with theater and then you kind of moved more into voiceover, into television. Is that true? You're not doing as much theater now, obviously with the pandemic?
Yes, I would say if I do a play once every 2 years, I'm lucky. Because there are just there are fewer roles in my age range, it's the theater, especially in the last few years, and rightly so, has reflected more of our population, which is much more diverse. There are more roles being written and cast with Black actors, with actors from, South Asian actors. And, this is reflecting our society, and rightly so. And there's that consideration as well. It's just a different period,
Okay.
When I was at Stratford, it was, good Lord, if there was one Black actor in the cast, that was something. But now there are many Black actors, many, South Asian and actors from different countries. That's great,
Chris, and can you tell us, if you could, in a few words, like about yourself, could you tell us what's the difference between theater acting and TV or film acting?
Well, it depends on the size of the theater. But in either case, because in the size of the theater, then, it's a question of vocal range. But ultimately, it's about just being truthful, being honest. And if the camera is, 6 inches from you, you have to do very little. And if you're feeling and thinking it, that's a difference. That sometimes won't register in a 1,000-seat theater or 800-seat theater. So you might have to just be a bit larger. But ultimately, it's the essentials are the same. And that is being truthful, being honest, and finding the essence of that scene, and listening in both cases, television, film, theater, listening to your scene partner. That's basically it.
And Chris, what about the director and the producer? You said that there's always this exchange also with them. So in the theater or in television, I imagine you also have to take them into consideration. Is that right?
Well, more so in the theater, of course, because you're working with them for anywhere from 2.5 weeks to 5 weeks, working on a play. With television and film, if you are, maybe if you are carrying the film, you have a much closer relationship. But if you're just in for a few days, they know pretty well, hopefully, what you're doing with that role because they've seen your audition. So they know what you're bringing to the table. And then there can be changes on set because, there are just surprises, just changes of the scene. And usually your contact is fairly limited in terms of working with the director. There are suggestions, there are, changes for emotional intentions, reactions. But with television and film, you're usually bringing on set what work you have done beforehand.
Okay.
That's really crucial.
So our last segment tonight before we begin to close is about screenplays. So can you tell us a little bit about your writing?
Yes, I'll go through these quickly. Capital Murder, and this is a fascinating story and not well known in Canada. The last two men who are pictured below, Arthur Lucas and Ronald Turpin, they were the last two men to be executed in Canada, and they were hanged back to back at the same time, of course, in Toronto at the Don Jail in 1962, in December 1962. That young man who's pictured above, Ross Mackay, he was about 28, 29. They didn't have legal aid in Toronto at that time, but he was what would be the equivalent of a legal aid lawyer. He would help people who were in trouble with the law, who really couldn't afford to pay. He believed there were grounds of innocence for both these men, that they should not have been convicted to hang. And he fought to the very end. And he was a gambler, he was an alcoholic, but brilliant in the courtroom. One well-known lawyer said, I would take Ross Mackay drunk in court over most sober lawyers. He was a brilliant defense lawyer and very good looking, charming, great energy, apparently. And I just think it's a great story about these three men, especially.
And so, Chris, this is available. You are, in other words, beginning to sell this?
Well, I've had meetings about this. I wrote it as a film script, but I've also drawn an outline for a limited 6 to 8 episode series, which I think is even better than a feature film. And there has been some interest in it, but it's a period film, 1962. And I think it's a matter of timing when it's a great role for 3 actors, especially Ross Mackay, the lawyer. His daughter is now a judge in Ontario, and we've met a couple of times. We've talked a couple of times. He died when he was 53, I've put it aside for the last year or so, but I'm trying to sort of get the energy back up to start promoting it again and see if anyone bites.
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to hearing and hopefully seeing it. Wonderful. So I'd just like to close with just a question. Actually, we have a comment from Carol Bagot-Forte. Carol? Thank you.
You can hear me. I just wanted to say, Chris, I have known you for 46 years as of the second week of next month. And we are now more than double the age that we were when we met. But I've got to say that the meanness that he is able to represent in the characters that he's played are not representative of his personal behavior. I would say, Chris, that your intelligence combined with humor, open-mindedness, and persistence are your greatest assets, and never retire.
That's very kind of you to say so, Carol.
You're like a brother.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So, Chris, looking forward, your next, what's to come? We originally talked about this show as being about continuing to work as an actor. Like you said, it's a difficult career that's become even more difficult. Like you said, and now as you get older, then it seems like there are fewer possibilities than when you're younger. Tell us what's in the future. What keeps you going, and what do you hope?
Well, I just finished, I was just in Toronto doing another episode of the Netflix series Lock and Key. And then this week, funny enough, I'm doing an episode of the series called The Legends of Tomorrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow. And also, I still, I mean, it's been put off, but I still do. There's a group of us, 4 or 5 of us, who have done the Comic-Con series all over the US for X-Men, the animated series. There's still a fan base for that series that we did in the mid-90s. And then the pandemic has put that on hold. But also my lecture on Edward Gordon Craig, which I've done at 3 universities in Canada. And I'm hoping, you know, maybe in the States, if my wife and I go back down to Los Angeles in the new year, you know, I might be able to find a university or 2 to do the lecture on Craig. It's 45 minutes with lots of slides, images about his work, his designs and everything. And, you know, it's been great to, you know, because usually it's of interest to the theater design, the directing and acting departments of the different universities. So, you know, just projects to keep me going, and auditions. You know, I have a voice audition tomorrow. And, yeah, so it's always going on.
Fantastic. So that, well, we look forward to hearing back from you and to hearing about your screenplay success, to seeing you on the screen, hearing your voice. And we are, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been fun. And thank you for everyone who's listened to me natter on.
So let's see how we can stay in touch with Chris. Here's his website, chrisbritton.ca. And in fact, everything that we went through today is available there. You can look at his screenplays, you can look at his theater and TV film gallery, the voiceovers, all available there. And Chris, if people would like to contact you, they go through your representation?
Well, yes, that's for work though, but within the next week, I will have a Facebook page, Chris Britton Actor, or they could email me, and I think my email is on my website. It's just Chris at chrisbritton.ca.
Chris at chrisbritton.ca. Okay, so I put that in the chat room.
That's my email thing. Yeah.
Fantastic. So again, thank you. So coming up next Wednesday, we have Martin Jaime and Reyes Oteo, music from Malaga. The Spanish port city of Malaga seems to be a great location for exchange, especially as pertains to culture. The composer and conductor Martin Jaime and electronic music composer Reyes Oteo, both of whom are residents of Malaga and teach at the Conservatorio Superior de Música de Malaga, will guide us through the city's music scene, discuss their roles in it, and the important work they do at the Conservatorio. Come welcome Martin Jaime and Reyes to our show. As always, upcoming information, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. So once again, thank you so much to Chris Britton, and thank you to Lino Rivera. And most of all, thanks to you, our participants, for making it all worthwhile. From Vienna, Austria, from Vancouver, Canada, from the Bay Area, California, goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.